Stocks go upward slightly after a rough reversal yesterday's stocks. Wendy's runs out of beef and takes burgers off the menus in some locations. The White House says we may be done with the coronavirus task force. We'll talk a bit about that. Wisconsin has heard oral arguments in a reversal of the governor's stay at home order. And we will talk just a bit about the Lincoln Project because I've done some research on it now and I can comfortably talk about what's going on there. Plus, we will talk about what I'm thankful for. I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good morning and welcome to Contemporary. I'm Jay Edgar. We've got a bunch to get to today, but before we get started, there are a couple things that I want to touch on here. First thing I want to touch on is something that was actually brought to my attention, and we're going to talk about it on Ed's World, I think, and it's going to be perfect because we're supposed to be having Adam Kokesh on again, but there is something that I wanted to bring up, and that is something that was said in the chat yesterday. Ron Helton pointed out, I remember the days when people volunteered time to a campaign. Politics for profit, the system is beyond repair. Yeah, we were talking about the fact that the campaigns are unionizing, that Bernie's going out and paying all these kids to campaign for him when, as much of a sycophantic following he had, they would have done it for free. They absolutely would have. And on top of that, I mean, we've got Biden is now unionizing his campaign workforce. I'm sure Hillary had payment on hers at some point. They're throwing the money out to try and get some of these people in here, but are they getting the people that are actually into the cause, or are they getting people who are just money hungry and power grabbing? Who knows? But yeah, that was just something I wanted to point out to. That was absolutely perfect to say out there. And I do want to say thank you to my mods over on DLive. Ron Helton took care of some spammers last night while we were playing video games, and you can you can freely speak. I don't mind that at all. You can come on here, you can say whatever nasty thing you want. We've actually let people get away with some pretty racy stuff on this show in the live chat. I will admit, under any other circumstance, I might have started throwing some mutes with some of the stuff we've had going on in the live chat in this show, but actually not necessarily Contemporary, but Ed's World for sure. We would have been throwing some mutes and some bans on, I think, a lot of other channels. We would have seen that. But what they were doing was in the context of conversation. What happened last night was just people spamming racial slurs, pictures, and stickers, and just disrupting the flow of conversation. And, you know, that's completely different than having a conversation of ideas that I may not like, but still people, for whatever reason, validly hold. So, thanks, Ron, for helping us out last night as we went on and played some video games and got into the live chat. That's awesome. I know that Sully Blue, right before we went live, had asked if we were looking for wrenches on this channel. The YouTube channel, I think we're all set on, but I am looking for another wrench or two for the DLive channel, just because that seems to be where the spammers seem to be descending right now. So, hit me up if you are over on DLive, and we will make that happen. But we need to get into the news today, of course, and before we do that, head on over to freedomscoop.com. Freedomscoop.com is going to be your one-stop shop for all of your news and commentary. We've got the generational gap. We have got Stephen Ignoramus, who made his glorious return yesterday. I haven't had a chance to look at it yet because he came back in while I was at work, and I played video games for the rest of the night. So, unfortunately, that was what took up my night, and people came in and checked that out. But we've got him over there. We've got also the R-rated conservative, Freckles and Britt, Wyatt Birkenhoff. I'm missing one. Oh, we've got me. That's who's over there. That makes 6, because we've got 6 shows over there. So go and check us out over there. We've got a merch shop over there. You can go check out merch for some of your favorite shows and new merch added all the time. So go and check us out and check out the back catalogs for a lot of great shows. So let's start out with Investors Business Daily. This is from Ed Carson. Dow Jones futures rise, e-commerce giant blast higher in coronavirus stock market rally. Shopify earnings surprise. And like they always say on these articles, the futures don't necessarily reflect day trading. I know that futures were going up yesterday, but I looked at the chart and for the most part, for the majority of the day, Everything else was going up too, but just kind of at the end, it all tapered off and we actually closed a little bit lower than where we started yesterday. So it's still a little bit of a roller coaster. We're still fighting a couple different wars here, the tariff war versus people going out and spending money. So we will see what happens throughout the day. It's going to be interesting to go, but Dow Jones futures rose Wednesday along with S&P 500 futures and Nasdaq futures, but off their morning highs on weak employment data. Shopify, Walt Disney, Beyond Meat, and Mercado Libre were among many earnings reports overnight after the coronavirus stock market rally continued to advance. Shopify earnings surprised early Wednesday by avoiding a loss. Revenue for the e-commerce software leader was better than expected. Shop stock reversed slightly lower. But on Tuesday, Shopify, Microsoft, PayPal, ServiceNow, Adobe, and Chegg cleared buy points, even as the Dow Jones and other major indices slashed gains in the final hour. Mercado Libre stock took set to join them, with the Latin American e-commerce payments leader blasting higher overnight. Beyond Meat stock jumped as well, but is well off highs. Disney stock woes fell slightly early Wednesday. Adobe stock, ServiceNow stock, Chegg stock, and Microsoft stock are all on IBD leaderboard. All four boast perfect 99 IBD composite ratings. PayPal stock has a stellar 97 composite rating. Maybe it's time to get on PayPal. Shopify stock has a 96 composite rating, while Mercado Libre stock has an OK 80 CR. Shop stock and PYPL stock broke out ahead of quarterly reports Wednesday, with PayPal earning, PYPL, it must be PayPal, earnings after close. Microsoft stock has multiple entries, while Adobe stock moved back into a buy zone. ServiceNow stock cleared a buy point after surging last week on earnings. Chegg stock gapped higher on earnings. Dow Jones futures rose 0.3% versus fair value, with Disney stock a modest drag. S&P 500 futures advanced 0.3%. Nasdaq 100 futures climbed 0.5%, no longer surging limit up or down. Dow Jones futures can still be volatile in overnight trading. Private employers cut 20.2 million jobs in April, according to the ADP employment report. The Labor Department will release non-farm payrolls and unemployment figures on Friday, as the coronavirus crisis takes a massive toll on the U.S. economy. Remember, as we said at the beginning of this article, that overnight action in Dow futures, Mercado Libre, and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. Thank you, Ed Carson. Now for a counterpoint, possibly over on CNBC. Stock market live updates. Dow futures up 100, Disney suspends dividend, oil drops 7%. This is from Yoon Lee, Peppa Stevens, and Fred Imbert. This is the live blog. 8:33 a.m., Fed's James Bullard says Friday jobs reports will be one of the worst in history. That's because the government told everybody not to go to work. St. Louis Federal Reserve President James Bullard said Wednesday that the April jobs report on Friday will likely be one of the worst in history. I've long maintained that the main impact here will be the second quarter, the negative impact. We're going to see crazy ADP numbers today, and jobs report will probably be one of the worst ever on Friday, Bullard told CNBC's Steve Leisman. But that's kind of expected because you're using the unemployment insurance program to provide pandemic relief, he added. That's exactly what we want to do. ADP data on Wednesday showed private payrolls slashed more than 20 million jobs in April, amid widespread shutdowns aimed to contain the spread of the coronavirus. 8:31 a.m. ADP report shows private payrolls drop of 20.2 million. The latest private payrolls from ADP and Moody's Analytics showed private payrolls were slashed by 20.2 million in April, as the coronavirus pandemic forced employers of all sizes to lay off people. The print is the worst in the survey's history going back to 2002. Still, it was slightly better than the Dow Jones estimate of a 22 million payroll reduction. 8:11 a.m. Oil turns lower, jeopardizing 5-session winning streak. Oil prices turned lower in early trading on the East Coast as oversupply fears counteracted optimism about economies around the world reopening. West Texas Intermediate slipped 1.75% to trade at $24.13 per barrel, after earlier hitting a session high of $26.08. International benchmark Brent crude shed 21 cents to trade at $30.76 a barrel. Both contracts have posted gains over the last 5 sessions, and amid claims that demand for oil may have bottomed. 8:07 a.m. Trump warns more death ahead for coronavirus. President Donald Trump said the choice to reopen and jumpstart the economy could inevitably cost some Americans their lives. It's possible there will be some deaths because you won't be locked in an apartment or house or whatever it is, Trump told ABC's David Muir in a rare network news interview. There'll be more death, that the virus will pass with or without a vaccine. And I think we're doing very well in vaccines. We're doing well. We're doing tremendous. We're doing the best. It's going with or without a vaccine. It's going to pass, and we're going to go back to normal, Trump said. 8:02 a.m. Activision Blizzard jumps after earnings. Shares of Activision Blizzard gained more than 6% during Wednesday's pre-market trading after the company beat top and bottom line estimates in the first quarter. The video game maker earned an adjusted 76 cents per share, well above the consensus estimate of 38 cents, with revenue also topping estimates. The company said it saw better than expected results from key franchises as populations sheltering at home turned to our content for entertainment and social connection. Activision also gave an upbeat outlook for 2020. Shares have gained 15% this year, while the S&P 500 has dropped 11%. Yeah, look at all that Call of Duty that's being played right now. Because that's Activision. And I'm sure that, I know, like we said on Monday, Joe and I both still hold Blizzard to its to what it did to Blitzchung, but I'm sure that a lot of people have forgotten at this point, and I'm sure that Diablo 3 is running again, and StarCraft is running again, and Destiny and Overwatch and everything else on the Blizzard network is back running again and booming more than ever with everyone being bored at home. And they're great games. If it wasn't for Principle, I would be up and playing them again. But that's what happens. And that's where we're going to cut it on this live blog here. Of course, it goes back several more hours, but we're going to cut it at this one here. So yeah, it's all looking good, and once again, I'm interested to see. And I mean, we saw the reason why we had the drop off in the last hour of trading, but we will see what happens today because it didn't stop futures from going up again in the off market. Now we will look at something that's going to affect people. Where's the beef? Some Wendy's are out of burgers. This is from WKOW.com, a local ABC affiliate here in Wisconsin. Where's your author? You don't have one. Oh, it's a CNN recast. The national meat shortage has come for Wendy's. The fast food chain says some menu items are unavailable, and one analyst estimates nearly 1 in 5 Wendy's restaurants are out of beef. I'm really going to have to make a phone call on that one because I actually know where the Wendy's beef comes from, and that does not sound like the owner of that company to let that happen. CNN reports that around 1,000 or 18% of Wendy's 5,500 U.S. restaurants are not serving any hamburgers or other meat-based items, according to an analysis of online menus at every location conducted by financial firm Stevens. There was no information in the CNN report if Wisconsin restaurants are affected. Wendy's said some of its menu items might be temporarily limited at some restaurants in this current environment. The company said its delivery schedule remains unchanged, but supply has been tight because beef suppliers across North America face production challenges during the pandemic. Many meat suppliers have temporarily closed their factories because workers are falling ill from COVID-19. We're working diligently to minimize the impact to our customers and restaurants and continue to work with our supplier partners to monitor this closely, a Wendy's spokesperson said. What's the point of staying open if you don't have burgers at a Wendy's? What else do you get at Wendy's? Chicken nuggets? Well, all meat products, they said, so those are going to be down. Bacon for the Baconator and the bacon potato. It's salads and baked potatoes, and it's meatless salads. If I didn't have meat at Wendy's and I was running it, I wouldn't be paying people. I'm sorry. There's no reason for that. But yeah, that's going to be something to watch for. And I mean, we did see that we were looking at some supply chains being interrupted. So here's one from the Daily Wire. Shapiro, what are we trying to accomplish with coronavirus policy? And I'm once again not going to read this whole article in Shapiro's voice because that sounds absolutely exhausting. As Americans debate how to reopen our society in the wake of COVID 19, we seem to be breaking down into three groups. First, those who believe the virus isn't particularly serious and desperately want to reopen everything as soon as possible. A small minority of Americans by polling data. Second, those who believe the virus is extraordinarily serious and want everything to remain closed as long as possible. A significant minority of Americans. And third, those who believe the virus is extraordinarily serious, but that the economic damage brought by COVID 19 is extraordinarily serious as well, and that we will have to reopen in considered fashion. The vast majority of Americans. While politicians on either side of the debate hope to position their opponents as advocates of either Group 1 or Group 2, the reality is that the honest debate is happening within Group 3. So, what does a considered coronavirus reopening strategy look like? The question rests on a deeper question: what assumptions are we making? Obviously, we all want to reduce deaths and the lowest possible number, but what assumptions are baked into our policy recommendations? Are we assuming a vaccine will come along in 3, 6, 12, or 18 months? Are we assuming herd immunity conferred at 60% of the population, or 80%? Are we assuming therapeutic measures that would reduce the infection fatality rates by 20, 30, or 100%, and within what period of time? We also want to reduce economic harm to the lowest possible level. Again, we must ask what assumptions are baked into our policy recommendations. Are we assuming that 75% reduction in restaurant seating will save 50% of restaurants? Are we assuming that shoppers will continue to socially distance 6 months from now? Are we assuming that the government will be able to shoulder trillions more in debt despite an underlying decrease in international appetite for such debt? The question of assumptions is key to our policymaking. That's because if we assume the worst, no therapeutics that seriously knock down the infection fatality rate, no vaccines for 18 months, and in an economy that simply cannot function at 1/4 or even half of normal capacity, then we are forced to a simple conclusion. In the absence of any significant change to the status quo, we must pursue a strategy of so-called controlled avalanche. The strategy has been coined by Israeli scientists. That's a Shapiro thing, definitely. Who suggest that the best strategy for reducing deaths while achieving herd immunity would be to tranche populations and then expose the least vulnerable populations to COVID 19 in order to let them develop antibodies, in essence, performing with public health the same function ski resorts perform when they create small avalanches in order to avoid a major avalanche. The simple fact is that 40 to 50% at low estimate of all deaths in the European Union from COVID 19 have occurred in nursing homes. The same is true in California. Had the authorities properly protected nursing homes, the infection fatality rate across the industrialized world could be half the current rate. It is also true that the infection fatality rate for COVID 19 ranges widely by age. As of late April, of the 37,308 deaths recorded by the CDC in prevention, just 1,036 were young people under the age of 45, and just 51 were below the age of 25. Even among younger populations, the vast majority of deaths were people with underlying conditions. Israeli scientists suggest that protecting the elderly and the vulnerable and then allowing herd immunity to develop among the least vulnerable would radically reduce overall mortality by over 40%, reduce the maximum number of people in need for ICUs, and decrease the time required to allow freedom to low-risk populations by months. This is obviously not a foolproof strategy. There's no foolproof strategy, but it may be better strategy than simply hoping for the best while watching the world economy implode, even as we know our deepest hopes for a deus ex machina may go unrewarded. I've had my differences with the guy, but I mean, he's kind of right on. But of course, he had to bring it up, and he had to bring up Israeli scientists. So that means that in the darkest corners of 4chan and the darkest corners of the internet, you're going to see a lot of triple parentheses and a lot of people saying that a certain group of people is trying to control the world population for whatever nefarious means these people in the dark corners of the internet believe that this certain population wants to control for. So we'll go and check that out. Alright, from Fox News, Trump administration faces backlash over talk of winding down coronavirus task force. This is from Tyler Olson. Democrats were quick to condemn the Trump administration Tuesday following comments from Vice President Mike Pence that the White House is in talks to potentially wind down its coronavirus task force, transferring its responsibilities to agencies like the Federal Emergency Management Fund as early as Memorial Day or early June. That's who I want handling this, FEMA. An official told Fox News that the members of the task force will continue to provide input, but the group will not be meeting as regularly as they had been at the outset of the pandemic. The official added that the White House's focus was shifting towards vaccines, therapeutics, testing, and reopening the economy. The Voice is painting the Trump administration's decision to work on transferring the task force's responsibilities came from the governor's offices, activists, and some members of Congress. It is unthinkable that President Trump would shut down the main task force established to coordinate our nation's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, while we're still in the midst of figuring out the health and economic implications of this pandemic, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said. It's shameful abdication of responsibility. Hoyer accused the president of downplaying the dangers of the coronavirus, blamed him for armed protesters showing up at state capitals, and said decisions like this one from the Trump administration are exactly why the House established the Select Committee to oversee the federal response to the COVID-19 panic. This is why they're going to impeach him again. Trump last week refused to let Dr. Fauci testify in front of a different House committee because, the president said later, they're a bunch of Trump haters, but he has said Fauci would testify to the Senate. On the Senate side, Senator Bernie Sanders called the Trump administration's decisions a tragedy. At a time when his own administration is predicting a significant increase in COVID-19 cases, our stable genius president is winding down the coronavirus task force. The self-declared Democratic Socialist said, "This is a true American tragedy. Thousands of unnecessarily die because of Trump's contempt for science, and the supply chain is interrupted, and I cannot get my pudding cup." The White House, however, pushed back against the comments that indicated the administration was limiting the involvement of medical professionals in the coronavirus response. Reporting on the task force is being misconstrued to suggest the White House is no longer involving medical experts. This is totally false. Press Secretary Kayla McEnany said in a tweet, "President Trump will continue his data-driven approach towards safely reopening." Another White House official added that the task force was never meant to be permanent. Members of the task force will continue providing input though the group will not be meeting as regularly as the focus changes towards vaccines, therapeutics, testing, and ultimately reopening the economy, the official said. Keep in mind the task force was always a temporary arrangement. Health experts will continue providing input while not meeting together every day. So, of course, because it's Trump, he's doing it wrong again, and he can't do anything right. And it was, just a week and a half ago we were talking about the fact that, Trump thinks he knows better than the governors, and he's got authorities over the governors, and now the governors need to know how to do it. Well, he's letting the governors do it, and now he's not doing enough. This is legitimately an administration where he will never be able to do anything right. And I would say this is a sad new normal, but unfortunately it was maybe a little bit better, but not this bad. But the same thing during the Bush administration. And of course, I wasn't paying attention to politics during HW or Reagan, so I had no idea what was going on there. But I'm sure that some of the elder people in my audience can shed some light on that one as well. Governor Cuomo responds to Trump, "Coronavirus is not a blue state issue." This is from Audrey McNamara over at CBS. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo responded to President Trump's comments about bailouts for states with Democratic governors. During his daily update on the state's response to the coronavirus pandemic on Tuesday, Cuomo said, "This is not a blue state issue. Every state has coronavirus cases. It's not just Democratic states that have economic shortfall," he said. "Republican states have economic shortfalls." In an interview with the New York Post published Monday, Mr. Trump said he thinks Congress is inclined to do a lot of things, but I don't think they're inclined to do bailouts. A bailout is different than, reimbursing for the plague. It's not fair to the Republicans because all the states need help. They're run by Democrats in every case. Florida's doing phenomenal. Texas is doing phenomenal. The Midwest is, fantastic. Very little debt, he said. You look at Illinois, you look at New York, you look at California, those three. There's tremendous debt there and many others. I don't think Republicans want to be in a position where they bail out states that have mismanaged over a long period of time, Mr. Trump told the publication. Cuomo took issue with the president's use of the word bailout, saying it does not characterize what states are asking for from the federal government. Really? What do you call it? Because of the coronavirus, we need financial help in restarting the economy, and that's what we're asking for from the federal government, he said. How do you call that a bailout, which is such a loaded word, such a rhetorical, hyperbolic word? Well, GM was asking for help from the federal government, and so were the banks back in 2007 and 2008, Mr. Cuomo. What do you call that? Cuomo said Democratic states have given the federal government billions more than they have received for years. Okay. This is not any mismanagement by the states, he said. If anything, the mismanagement has been on behalf of the federal government, and that's where the mismanagement has gone back decades. Be careful, you might go after the Messiah. The governor also said Tuesday that the number of hospitalizations, intubations, and new cases of the coronavirus continues to decline in his state. He said there were an additional 230 deaths reported on Monday, up 226 from Sunday. Holy shit, somebody talked about the numbers again. Cuomo again reiterated that New York must learn the lessons of the pandemic, even as it continues to fight it. He said the state must build back better, not only replace what was lost during the pandemic, but improve upon it. What the government does today, we will literally determine how many people live and how many people die. And that's not hyperbolic. That's not overly dramatic. In fact, that's just a fact, he said. That federal government has to be able to pass legislation. To pass legislation, it has to be on bipartisan basis. And I saw a lot of this going around Twitter the other day too, because, once again, everyone on Twitter wants you to believe that California is paying the bills for the rest of the country, and that's just not the case. They seem to forget, and I mean, it's hard to find the stat. I did some looking for the stat a few times over it, but California is a little over $1 trillion in debt to the federal government. There's no data on what New York is on that I could find. Of course, I'm sure if I got off Google and went to DuckDuckGo, I could probably find it pretty easily. And Illinois has got to be up there too. But they keep saying that, oh, well, these states are paying the welfare for Kansas. Well, show me some statistics about that and we'll talk. This is an NBC News article to the same thing that we just talked about, so I'm actually going to pass this one by here. And we will go on to talk about the Wisconsin Supreme Court. So this is from a local affiliate, and one of the things that I wanted to comment on with this before I started reading this was the fact that the only news that we have on this came from local Wisconsin affiliates. Whereas when we hear some of the same stories about Michigan and the backlash and the protests there and the fact that the legislature is trying to block and censure Gretchen Whitmer because they're evil GOP and she's a good, decent Democrat. We're looking at some of the same things here in Wisconsin where, once again, both chambers of our legislature are run by the GOP and there's a slight conservative... Well, not slight right now, but it will be slight conservative majority in our state's court as well, our state's highest court. We didn't hear this on the main national news because Governor Evers is not running to be the vice president of the United States, but we're looking at some of the same things here. So, from Fox 6 News, Wisconsin Supreme Court justices question legality of COVID-19 in order set to run until May 26th. Let me take a drink so maybe I can read a headline without tripping over my words here. Excuse me. This is from Jason Calvi and AP Wire Service. Conservative justices on the Wisconsin Supreme Court cast doubt during arguments on Tuesday about the power of Governor Tony Evers' health secretary to issue a safer at home order closing most of the non essential businesses in the state. The court held an hour and a half oral arguments on Tuesday, May 5th, in a case brought by Republican legislative leaders. They want the court to block the order issued by Department of Health Services Secretary Andrea Palm, who's a Clinton operative, by the way, arguing that Palm exceeded her authority in issuing the stay-at-home order that's set to run until May 26th. One justice compared the order to tyranny, while Evers' administration argued lives were on the line. People will die if this order is enjoined with nothing to replace it, said Colin Roth, Assistant Attorney General of Wisconsin. Conservative justices zoomed in on Safer at Home's legal foundation, where in the Wisconsin Constitution did the people confer the authority on a single unelected cabinet member to compel almost 6 million people to stay at home and close their businesses and face imprisonment if they don't comply. Yeah, I never covered the Calumet County police encounter, and actually maybe we should. Maybe we should talk about that a little bit tomorrow. It's old news at this point here, but I mean, that does give us some context as to what's going on with this. I'm going to put that on the agenda. We'll talk about that tomorrow. With no input from the legislature without the consent of the people, asked Justice Rebecca Bradley, that legislative intent that grants the DHS to do whatever is necessary to combat a novel deadly communicable disease, Roth said. State law does say DHS may forbid public gatherings in schools, churches, and other places to control outbreaks and epidemics, and may authorize and implement all emergency measures necessary to control communicable diseases. Health Services Secretary-designee Andrea Palm issued Safer at Home, breaking it could lead to 30 days behind bars and a $250 fine. She can all by herself sit down at her computer keyboard, write up a description of behavior, and make it criminal, asked Justice Daniel Kelly. What I would say, Your Honor, is the legislature created the statutory scheme itself, Roth said. Republicans say the order goes too far and skips legislative oversight of the state statute, Chapter 227, which is correct. Every day at DHS and this administration proceeds as if they are not subject to 227. We are imperillibly harmed as the entity that created DHS and gave it its powers in the first place, said Ryan Walsh, attorney for Wisconsin legislature. Republicans suggest the court give 6 days, or DHS 6 days to come up with a new rule with later legislative oversight. The cities of Racine and Milwaukee joined briefs supporting the order. Wisconsin, of course they did. Wisconsin's Chamber and Tavern League filed briefs against. And that is the end of the article, it looks like. So, yeah. And once again, you're not hearing about this all around the country because Evers is not on the short list to be the Vice President of the United States. There's a reason that I put my smart money on Gretchen Whitmer as the presumptive vice presidential nominee, because the media is propping her up and making sure that we hear about her all around the country no matter what. They're trying to make us comfortable hearing about the name Gretchen Whitmer over and over again. And as far as what we have going on here, that actually does go against state law, the fact that we're going out to May 26th. The DHS and the executive branch of our government gives 60 days, and May 26th goes beyond the 60 days. And of course, this may happen again. But if it goes beyond 60 days, which May 26th would have, then the legislature has to make a law doing it. And that's what they're arguing in court right now. Of course, the people and the cities of Racine and Milwaukee want the state to stay in lockdown forever and in eternity and anything else because Evers good, and that's actually where the majority of his votes came from. But the businesses want to get open. And once again, if you go by our state law, you've got 60 days, and after 60 days, they have to make a law. The executive order can last for 60 days, and that's it. So, that was the first day of oral arguments. I don't know where this is going to, well, I do kind of know where this is going to go, but I bet you this goes up to the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court as well at some point here. So, we shall see, and we shall carry this on. Speaking of the U.S. Supreme Court to hear arguments on Trump administration Obamacare dispute over birth control. This is from Pete Williams over at NBC News. The Supreme Court on Wednesday will consider whether the Trump administration can give employers more leeway in refusing to provide employees with free birth control by citing religious or moral objections. Women's rights groups said that if the change is upheld, tens of thousands of women nationwide would be denied coverage. Birth control is essential health care that nearly 9 in 10 women will use in their lifetimes. It's a basic health care and economic issue, said Alexis McGill Johnson, acting president of Planned Parenthood. Yeah, you're not biased or anything. Since Congress passed the ACA in 2010, the issues of which employers can decline to include coverage for contraceptives in their health care plans has remained unresolved and highly controversial. Churches and their auxiliaries were originally given an exemption. In a later rule, the government allowed some nonprofit, religiously affiliated employers an accommodation. They could opt out of directly providing the coverage as long as they gave notice of their objections. Their insurers or the government would then pick up the cost of the coverage. Here's the thing that I've had a problem with. Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby are Christian-led companies that may not align with your views on birth control. Now, I can understand a little bit. I can give some concession to the fact that a lot of this was going on in the point where we were sitting at 8% unemployment, where people were taking whatever job they could get their hands on, and Chick-fil-A and Hobby Lobby were booming still in the middle of the unemployment crisis we had going on at the time. At the time, you were going to take any job that you could get. But for the last 3 years, up until just a few weeks ago, we had 7 million unfilled jobs in this country. And you notice there was no argument going on at the time either. But yeah, you could go out and get whatever job you wanted at that point. You didn't have to go and work for a company whose views opposed your own. So if you were going there specifically to work for that company to file the lawsuit, then that should be dismissed out of the Supreme Court right then and there. But that's the way that I see it. You have choices. You don't have to go work for a company whose values don't coincide with your own. Or at least you didn't up until like 3 weeks ago. And I've got this feeling by the end of 2020, we're going to be back to the point where you don't have to go work for a company whose values don't align with your own. But that's my argument for the whole thing. The current case involves Trump administration rules that would allow publicly traded companies and large universities to claim religious objections for refusing to provide the coverage. Even more broadly, employers and schools with any moral objection would also be exempt from the requirement. We will not allow the people of faith to be targeted, bullied, or silenced anymore, President Donald Trump said when the rule was imposed. New Jersey and Pennsylvania sued, saying they would have to pick up most of the cost of contraceptive coverage, and a federal appeals court last year blocked enforcement of the rule nationwide. The Trump administration and the Little Sisters of the Poor, an order of Catholic nuns that has consistently fought the contraceptive insurance requirement, asked the Supreme Court to take their appeal. In its court filing, the Justice Department argues that the exception should be broader because many employers sincerely believe that any use of their health plans to provide contraceptive coverage, even if they're not directly involved in the process, makes them complicit in a violation of their religious beliefs. A federal law, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, allows federal agencies to be more protective of religious rights that might strictly be required, the government says. Or, this is just a thought, maybe it's crazy, I don't know, but maybe we could just get the government out of healthcare completely and only put a provision on there that you have to cover pre-existing conditions. Because there are going to be a lot of companies that are out there trying to throw this birth control thing out as a perk to, hey, come here and work, come on. Hey, we'd love to have you over here. A lot of companies out there are going to be like that because, once again, you get the government out of the way. You get the government to stop telling people they can't go to work, and we are going to go back to millions of unfilled jobs. I see it by the end of 2020. I see it happening. Unless something major happens or they find a way to actually tank the economy, I could see us going back into the millions of unfilled jobs. So you're going to need those benefits to try and attract employees away from your competition. All right, this was an interesting story here because as far as I know, I never heard anything about this initially, but now Biden has weighed in on it, so now it's become national news. And this is going to push the divisiveness of our country even further. Georgia grand jury review recommended in fatal shooting of Ahmaud Arbery. Biden weighs in, and it's that last part that's made this a national story. This is from Edmund DeMarch over at Fox News. A Georgia prosecutor on Tuesday recommended that a grand jury review the fatal shooting of a black man while he was out jogging earlier in the year. The investigation into the killing of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery on February 23rd has been criticized by many in the state. Now, a disturbing video that emerged online of Tuesday purports to show key parts of the incident and has increased calls for charges. Joe Biden, the presumptive Democratic presidential nominee, took to Twitter to write that the video is clear and Arbery was killed in cold blood. He wrote that his heart goes out to Arbery's family and called for transparent investigation into the murder. So now we're going to start hearing about this for the rest of time because we're not hearing about the coronavirus numbers, and it looks like we actually might have this whole thing beat. So now we have to have the next crisis going up, and what do you know? The next crisis is going to be racism. The black man can be seen in the video running at a slow pace toward a white truck that is stopped in the middle of the country road. Two men are seen outside the vehicle, including one standing in the truck's bed. The black man seems to attempt to run around the truck, and the moment he clears the vehicle, a shot rings out. A brief struggle ensues in what looks to be an effort to control the shotgun, and another 2 shots are heard. According to the video, the runner staggers away and collapses. The man in the truck's bed is seen holding a handgun after he climbs out to approach the others. Tom Durden, the district attorney pro tempore for the Brunswick Judicial Court, called for a grand jury review of the case stemming from the shooting in Brunswick of Jacksonville. New4Jax.com of Jacksonville, Florida reported. Durden told the Associated Press that no arrests have been made. He declined to say what charges he would have a grand jury consider. He declined to comment Tuesday when the prosecutor was asked if he could verify the video showing the shooting of Arbery. The reporter said Travis McMichael, the son of the former district attorney investigator, fired the fatal shot. There it is. He was not immediately charged because he claimed that he was conducting a citizen's arrest. That doesn't hold up well in court, the report said. There have been a string of burglaries in the area, and Arbery supposedly fit the description of the suspect. Yeah, that guy needs the chair, dude. I'm sorry to say. That was a cold-blooded murder. From everything that we're seeing out of here, I don't see any evidence. Well, of course, I'm not seeing any of the evidence in front of me. I'm just going on what Fox News is reporting. But with the details that they're laying out here, if I saw the evidence and saw it presented in court, I'm pretty sure this would come out to be an open-shut case for me. So give the kid the chair and move on with the day. Lee Merritt, the attorney for Arbery's family, told the Washington Post that family members watched the video of the shooting on Tuesday. Mr. Arbery had not committed any crime, and there was no reason for these men to believe they had the right to stop him with weapons or to use deadly force, and furthermore, of their unlawful attempted stop. He told the paper. The Post, citing a police report, said Arbery was spotted jogging by Gregory McMichael, the former investigator. News4Jax reported that the father called 911 at 1:08 p.m. to report a black man running down the street. He reportedly told a dispatcher that he suspected Arbery was involved in recent burglaries. The 64-year-old called his son and they armed themselves, according to the report. The police report says Gregory McMichael told officers he and his son first tried to stop Arbery by shouting, "Stop, stop, we want to talk to you." The father claimed that Arbery attacked his son and they got in the struggle for the shotgun. Police said the son fired 2 shots. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp tweeted Tuesday that the head of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation offered to assist the investigation. Good. Good. Get this taken care of. I'd like to see the evidence before I make a final judgment on this, but from what is being presented to me right now, this sounds pretty open and shut. All right, last news story. Then we'll talk about Lincoln Project, talk about what I'm thankful for, and get on out of here. Ayanna Pressley, Biden, Democrats can address Reid allegations and defeat the occupant of the White House. This is from Breitbart. From Hannah Blow. Representative Ayanna Pressley, in an op-ed Monday, lamented the lack of justice for survivors of sexual assault, but added that she rejects the false choice that my party and our nominee can't address the allegations at hand and defeat the occupant of the White House. I'm here for an uncomfortable conversation, the squad member wrote in an op-ed, demonstratively spurred by Joe Biden facing accusations of sexual assault from former Senate staffer Tara Reid. Excuse me. It is a necessary conversation, Presley said, adding, I am a survivor, and I am an elected official. I'm not new to watching survivors bare their souls, and I'm not new to being offered false choices in politics. The Massachusetts lawmaker said the Biden-Reed saga prompts an urgent and visceral question. What does an authentic path towards healing and justice look like for survivors in America? She asked. She admitted that there is no clear answer or path and stressed the importance of listening to survivors while slamming her Republican colleagues. They, she claimed, slammed doors in the faces of survivors during the Kavanaugh hearings and are spending millions to weaponize these allegations against Democratic women in purple states. Do not care at all about survivor justice. Despite the sharp demonization of her Republican colleagues, Presley essentially walked in the line herself, attempting to reconcile her call for survivor justice with her innate desire to defeat the occupant of the White House. She wrote in part, Our assumptions and our starting points for these conversations have to change, and the allegations against Joe Biden are no exception. Listening to the stories of those who step forward is the baseline. We say believe survivors because for nearly all of history, the experiences of survivors have been dismissed and derided by a society steeped in misogyny and hatred. We advocate what we begin with assumptions of credibility and move to due process and reconciliation. We are in the throes of an election of the greatest consequence, one that will determine if the core rights and tenets of democracy survive this nation. The stakes cannot be overstated, but I have no patience for any person who tells me that is a reason to lower my voice. I reject the false choice that my party and our nominee can address the allegations at hand and defeat the occupant of the White House. So, realistically here, this is past the statute of limitations. So, for all intents and purposes, this should not be able to do anything to hurt Biden. And this would have been the same thing with the Kavanaugh case. But what they're doing right now is trying to sidestep the character assassination that they tried to do in the Kavanaugh case. To try and say that, yes, okay, address this, but we're still going to vote for the guy. And we have so many people out there blatantly saying that they will vote for the rapist to get the other rapist out of office. I don't care if he raped a person. I'm going to vote for him. You see all over Twitter. You see the images all out there. So they don't care what he did. They don't care what a person does unless he has an R next to his name. And then, of course, it is the most evil thing, and that person should be disqualified from any public office. And thank you for showing us this double standard, Miss Presley. All right. Last thing I want to talk about here is I want to talk about this Lincoln Project that we talked a little bit about yesterday because I was curious what it was. So I actually looked directly at their website to see. The Lincoln Project, dedicated Americans protecting democracy. The Lincoln Project is holding accountable those who would violate their oaths for the Constitution and would put others before Americans. We have seen the best and worst of American politics. We understand that actions must be taken now to protect the institutions that have made the United States the greatest nation the world has ever known. Our mission, defeat President Trump and Trumpism at the ballot box. We do not undertake this task lightly, nor from ideological preference. Our many policy differences with the National Democrats remain. However, the priority of all patriotic Americans must be a shared fidelity to the Constitution and a committed to defeat those candidates who have abandoned their constitutional oaths, regardless of party. Electing Democrats who support the Constitution over Republicans who do not is a worthy effort. Dude, if you elect the Democrats out of this current Democratic Party, and I'm not saying all Democrats, because we've had our JFKs in our past. We've had our Carters who would be closer to an actual Democrat than what we have going out here. And I disagree with Carter on just about everything at this point. Hell, we had Bill Clinton who would be closer to an actual Democrat than what the Progressive Party has pushed the Democrats for. If you put this current Democratic Party in power, the people that are behind the Lincoln Project right now are going to be let out in chains. They're going to be led to the boxcars in chains. I promise you that. From this current progressive Democratic Party. Now, if we go back, of course, to the party of JFK, that would be completely different. But from this current Democratic Party, and we'll read the names of the people that are behind it, but these people that are behind this would be the first ones to be let out in the stocks. Our inspiration, President Abraham Lincoln, led the United States through its bloodiest, most divisive, and most decisive period in our history. He fought not because he wanted to, but because he knows or knew the dual goals of preserving the Union and the end of slavery would be achieved only through armed conflict. Lincoln always kept the enormous. Are you calling for war? Kept the enormous cost or human cost in the struggle on the front of his mind. At Gettysburg, he implored us not to forget those who had given their last full measure of devotion to preserving the American experiment. As it became clear the Union would be victorious, Lincoln's thoughts turned to how the nation would bind up its wounds and move forward together. Today, we find ourselves divided again. Sectionalism in the country and factionalism in government has led to even uglier examples of how our political system is failing. President Trump and those who would sign on to Trumpism are a clear and present danger to the Constitution and our republic. Only defeating so polarizing a character as Trump will allow the country to heal its political and psychological wounds and allow for a new, better path forward for all of Americans. Advisors, and here we go, these are the people that think that the Democrats will accept them with open arms in their current party iteration. George Conway, a lawyer in New York City and founding member of Checks and Balances, a group of conservative and libertarian lawyers organized to defend the rule of law. Reed Galen, an independent political strategist, he left the Republican Party in 2016 and has spent the last 3 years dedicated to the political reform movement, creating a better system for all voters. Jennifer Horn is a communications strategist and former chairman of the New Hampshire Republican Party. She was the first Republican woman in New Hampshire nominated for federal office. Mike Madrid, a Republican strategist and former political director of the California Republican Party. He's going to be the first one in stocks. He serves as a senior advisor to the California Latino Economic Institute. Yeah. Steve Schmidt is a national political strategist. He's worked for President George W. Bush, Senator John McCain, and Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Ron Steslow is a brand and marketing strategist and independent political consultant. Since leaving the GOP in 2016, he has worked to put voters first in our political system. John Weaver. John is a national political strategist. He worked with President H.W. Bush, Senator McCain, and Ohio Governor John Kasich. And Rick Wilson, a longtime Republican media consultant and the author of the New York Times bestselling book, Everything Trump Touches Dies. He might get a pass. But the rest of them, they are not going to get forgiveness from the current progressive wing of the Democratic Party that's in control. Just let this party fall so they can reform, so we can actually have two viable parties again. Let the Democrats fall, let them kick all the progressives out of their party, and let them reform at this point. Please, I'm begging you. Next fall's elections will be about much more than just who controls one house of the Congress or the White House next November. The American people will decide the path for America's futures. All of the prosperity and freedom we've come to take for granted depends on our public servants serving the Constitution first, last, and always. Today, one party has abdicated that responsibility and instead pledged their loyalty to one person. Yes, and his name is Barack Obama. But you guys are too blinded by your rage to see any of that right now. So that's what the Lincoln Project is. I've read considerably about this at this point, and yeah, that's the big part of it, is the people who are in charge of it are the first people that are going to be on the stockade as soon as the progressives take back over. So that is going to be it for news, and of course what we do on Thursday is something that, or it's not even Thursday right now, wow. What we do on Wednesday is something that I'm thankful for. And I put a little bit of thought into this morning. Of course, I've been working almost nonstop for the past few days, so I don't always get a chance to think about this as much as I could, but I put a little bit of thought into it this morning, and then I realized that I have been working nonstop for the past few days. And not a lot of people can say that. We talked earlier on about the fact that we're looking for rent strikes because people are 2 months behind on their mortgages and their rents. And yes, they are going to have to pay that in full as they come along again. But I haven't had to do that. And a lot of people haven't. We still have enough of a sector in this country where we still need people to go to work every day. And I've been fortunate enough to the fact that I have one of those jobs where I do need to be there every day in order for everything to function. And trust me, even though we're in a little bit of a slow period right now because some of our customers are not essential workers and don't need to be there right now, If I'm not there, it goes into chaos. I took that day off last Tuesday because I'd been so sick over the weekend that I hadn't slept and I needed to go and sleep. I took that day off and I came back and my whole work area was just in chaos from people trying to cover for me for the last 2 days. And I go in on a Tuesday because I don't work on Mondays because of Ed's World. And I go in and it's just in chaos. They do need me there as long as they're running, which I'm thankful for. I'm thankful for that. But I'm thankful for the fact that I can also keep working and not just over my regular 10 to 7 job, that I can come here every day and do the work for you guys as well. And I don't ask anything from you, of course. Some of you guys will throw lemons for me, and I think that's great. And I do believe that if I spend some time this weekend and open up a PayPal, which I'm planning on doing, that you guys will line it a little bit. You don't have to do much. I'm not looking to get rich off you guys. You guys will come here. And it's the same reason I won't run ads on any of my stuff over on YouTube. Even though I'm 1,800 or 800 subscribers away from where I would need to be for them to start running ads. I'm not going to run ads over there because I'm not out here to beg you guys for your money. But I'm thankful every day that you guys come out here and read the news with me every day and discuss the news with me and my guests every week and watch me play video games for a little while. Even come in and ask questions while I'm out there. So I'm thankful. I'm thankful for the fact that there's enough of a market for what I do, that I get to keep working, that I don't have to fall behind on bills, that I can still stay relatively good in this economy that nobody knows where it's going to go. And that's what I'm thankful for at this point. So we will be back here tomorrow with much more news. I'm sure that there's a lot more to talk about. And yeah, we've got a lot more to get to as well. Even going back on some stuff that we talked about today. We'll talk about the Calumet County stuff tomorrow. I'll find an article. We'll maybe find some video to listen to on this. But we'll be back here tomorrow with much more news. Until then, I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.